My name is Alaska Turner, and I am 28 years old. I grew up in a family of wealth and privilege, where our business empire was everything. But what happens when your own father throws you through a glass door just for speaking the truth? Blood dripped down my face as I smiled and said the words that changed everything. You just lost everything. Within 24 hours, I dismantled the empire they never thought I deserved a piece of. Before I start my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button to hear more stories about reclaiming what is rightfully yours. I grew up in a sprawling Connecticut mansion with 14 bedrooms, an indoor pool, and a view of the Atlantic that most people only see in magazines. Our family home was a monument to wealth, sitting on 6 acres of manicured gardens and exclusive privacy. Every morning I would wake up to the sound of housekeepers already busy downstairs preparing for another day, serving the mighty Turner family. My father, James Turner, built Turner Enterprises from what he always claimed was nothing. He loved telling the rags to riches story. At every dinner party, poor boy from South Boston, who worked his way through college, had a brilliant idea for a tech innovation and transformed it into a multi-billion-dollar corporation. By the time I was born, Turner Enterprises was already a household name in technology and communications. The company had expanded into media, pharmaceuticals, and real estate. To the outside world, my father was the American dream, personified a business genius who created an empire through sheer determination. Mother was a different story altogether. Diana Turner, formerly Diana Westbrook, had been a successful model in her youth. She met my father at a charity gala when his fortune was already substantial. With her blonde hair, green eyes, and tall, slender figure, she was exactly the trophy wife my father believed would complement his success. She transitioned seamlessly from runway model to socialite, organizing charity events and sitting on boards of cultural institutions, carefully building our family image while my father built the business. Then there was my older brother, Marcus, 4 years my senior and the apple of my father's eye. From the moment he was born, Marcus was groomed to inherit the empire. My father would carry him into board meetings as a toddler, joking that the youngest Turner was already learning the family business. As we grew up, Marcus received endless attention opportunities and forgiveness for his failures. When he crashed his first car at 16, my father laughed it off as boys will be boys. When he barely graduated high school, it was because real businessmen do not need straight A's. Every mistake was reframed as a character-building experience for the future CEO. I was different. From a young age, I showed an interest and aptitude for business that surprised even my father. I would sit in his home office after school asking questions about stock prices and profit margins, while other girls my age were playing with dolls. At 10 years old, I started my first business selling homemade jewelry to classmates and managed to turn a profit within a month. My father initially seemed impressed, even proud, taking time to explain concepts and encouraging my curiosity. That all changed as I entered my teens. Suddenly, my questions became interruptions. My ideas were cute but impractical. As I matured, the message became clear: business was not for me. My role in the Turner legacy would be ornamental, just like my mother. Despite this shift, I excelled in school. Straight A student at Westfield Academy, the most prestigious private school in Connecticut, captain of the debate team, perfect SAT scores, acceptance to Harvard Business School, where I graduated at the top of my class. All achievements that would have been celebrated if accomplished by Marcus, but for me they were acknowledged with polite smiles and quick changes of subject at family dinners. The only person who truly saw me was my grandfather, William Turner. Unlike my father-grandpa, William recognized something in me that reminded him of himself. While my father was busy taking Marcus to board meetings, Grandpa would invite me to his study to discuss business theory and economics. He had officially retired from the company when my father took over as CEO, but he remained on the board and kept meticulous track of company developments. "You have the Turner business sense," he would tell me, his eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses, "more than anyone else in this family." During college breaks, while Marcus was partying in Europe on the company dime, I would sit with grandfather reviewing business journals and discussing market trends. He began teaching me things about Turner Enterprises that even my father did not realize I knew: financial structures, key client relationships, operational challenges, and strategic priorities. What started as casual lessons became a secret mentorship. One day, he told me during my senior year of college, I am going to make sure you get what you deserve, Alaska. I have been setting things in order. I did not understand what he meant then. But as his health began to decline, he became more insistent, more urgent in his teachings. He began referencing documents I needed to find conversations I needed to remember. I sensed he was preparing me for something, but I never imagined how important his guidance would become or how soon I would need it. As graduation approached, I felt ready to finally claim my place in Turner Enterprises. With my degree, my lifetime of preparation, and grandfather's confidence in me, surely now my father would see my value. I was wrong. So very wrong. I returned home after graduation with my Harvard business degree and a portfolio of business plans I had developed specifically for expanding Turner Enterprises into emerging markets. My research had identified untapped opportunities that could increase company valuation by 30% within 5 years. I had spent months perfecting these proposals, pulling all-nighters and sacrificing my social life to create something that would finally make my father see me as more than just his daughter. The morning after the graduation party they threw, in my honor I knocked on my father's home office door, portfolio in hand and confidence in my heart. "Alaska," he said without looking up from his computer. "What can I do for you?" I wanted to discuss my role at Turner Enterprises, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I have some ideas for expansion that I think could really benefit the company. He finally looked up, expression somewhere between amusement and irritation. "Your role? We have an opening in the PR department. Jessica is going on maternity leave next month. That would be perfect for you. You have always been good with people." PR, I could not hide my dismay. "Dad, I graduated top of my class from Harvard Business. I have been preparing for operations or strategy my whole life." He laughed, actually laughed, as if I had told a mildly amusing joke. "Alaska, honey, those departments require experience. Real-world experience. And how am I supposed to get that experience if you will not give me the opportunity?" His amusement vanished. "This is not a debate, PR or marketing. Take your pick. We can revisit other options after you have paid your dues." But Marcus never had to pay dues. Marcus walked straight from his mediocre college performance into a vice president position. The double standard was so blatant it took my breath away. I took the PR position because it gave me access to company information. Within 3 months, I discovered financial irregularities that sent warning bells ringing in my head. Unusual transfers to offshore accounts. Vendor contracts with companies that seemed to exist only on paper. Resource allocation that made no strategic sense. At first, I thought it might be embezzlement by a finance executive. Then I started noticing the correlation between these irregularities and my brother's projects. Marcus had been put in charge of international expansion with a focus on Asian markets. On paper, he was investing millions in infrastructure and relationship building, but the results were suspiciously minimal. I tracked Marcus's corporate credit card statements and found charges from nightclubs in Tokyo, luxury hotels in Singapore, and jewelry stores in Hong Kong. He was using company money to fund his lifestyle while producing quarterly reports full of vague promises about developing relationships and laying groundwork. Worse, my father was covering for him. I found emails where executives raised concerns about Marcus's spending and performance only to be shut down by my father. "My son knows what he is doing," was the standard response, followed by veiled threats about job security if they pressed the issue. I tried talking to my mother over lunch at her favorite restaurant. I chose a public setting, hoping it would keep the conversation civil. "Mom, have you seen the company financials lately?" I asked, after our salads arrived. "Why would I look at those?" She dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Your father handles the business, dear." "I think there are some serious problems. Marcus is misusing company funds and Dad is covering it up." She set down her fork with deliberate precision. "Alaska, why must you always try to create drama? Your brother is learning the business. There will be growing pains." "Growing pains that could bankrupt the company if they continue," I insisted. Her eyes hardened. "You have always been jealous of your brother. It is not attractive, dear. Focus on your own work and let your father worry about Marcus." I realized then that my mother was not just ignorant of the problems, she was complicit in maintaining the family mythology. In her mind, my father could do no wrong, and Marcus was the rightful heir. I was the troublemaker for questioning this natural order. The situation came to a head at a family dinner the following week. My parents had invited the board of directors and their spouses, a quarterly tradition meant to blend business and pleasure. The conversation turned to the company's 5-year plan, with my father boasting about Marcus's work expanding into Asian markets. "We are projected to see 20% growth in the region by next quarter," my father announced proudly. I could not stay silent. "Actually," I said, "the financial reports show we are down 15% year over year in Asia, with expenses increasing by 40%. The table went silent. My father's face darkened. "Alaska, you are confused about those numbers." "I am not confused, Dad. I have been reviewing the quarterly statements. We are hemorrhaging money on failed ventures and personal expenses disguised as business costs." Marcus jumped in, face flushed, with anger or embarrassment. Possibly both. "You do not know what you are talking about. Building relationships in Asia takes time and investment. Is that what you call spending $80,000 at the Monarch Club in Tokyo relationship building?" My father slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. "That is enough, Alaska. You work in PR. You have no business accessing those financial records or questioning company strategy at a dinner party. You are embarrassing yourself and this family." The board members looked uncomfortable, exchanging glances that told me they knew I was right. But no one spoke up. No one challenged the great James Turner. After the guests left, my father cornered me in the kitchen. "If you ever pull a stunt like that again, you will find yourself not just out of the company, but out of this family. Do I make myself clear?" The threat was unmistakable. Fall in line or be excommunicated. The perfect Turner family image had to be maintained at all costs. That night, unable to sleep, I went to my father's home office to look for evidence that could help me understand what was really happening. In a locked drawer that I managed to open with an old trick grandfather had taught me, I found files dating back to the founding of Turner Enterprises. Files in my grandfather's handwriting, not my father's. The original business plan, the seed funding documentation, the patent applications, all had William Turner's signature, not James Turner's. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. The company had not been my father's brilliant creation. It had been my grandfather's. The rags to riches story my father had been telling for decades was a fiction. He had not built the company from nothing. He had inherited it and taken credit for its creation. As I was processing this discovery, my phone rang. It was the nursing home where my grandfather now lived. His health had been declining for months. The night nurse told me he was asking for me urgently, saying he needed to tell me something important before it was too late. As I was leaving to go to him, I overheard my parents in their bedroom door slightly ajar. "He is going to tell her everything," my mother's voice concerned. "He can say whatever he wants," my father replied. "We have the legal documentation. I made sure of that years ago." "But what about the trust, if he tells her about that?" "The trust is ironclad. She cannot access it without our approval until she is 35. By then, it will not matter." What trust? What were they hiding from me? I slipped out of the house with more questions than answers, racing toward the one person who had always been honest with me. The one person who might help me understand the web of lies my family had woven. The nursing home was quiet when I arrived, most residents already asleep. Grandfather William was in a private suite at the end of a long corridor, the best care money could buy. Despite his wealth, there was something deeply sad about seeing him there, diminished and removed from the world he once commanded. "Alaska," he said as I entered, his voice weaker than I remembered. "You came." "Of course I came, Grandpa." I sat beside his bed and took his frail hand. "What is it?" The nurse said it was urgent. His eyes cloudy with cataracts, but still sharp with intelligence fixed on mine. "I do not have much time left. There are things you need to know. Truths your father has buried." Over the next hour, as the night deepened around us, my grandfather unraveled the true history of Turner Enterprises. The company had been his brainchild, developed when my father was still in college. The initial technology, patents, the business model, the first round of investor funding, all had come through William's work and connections. "I was diagnosed with heart problems," he explained, his breath labored. "The doctors told me I had a year at most. I wanted to secure the company's future, so I brought James in, taught him everything I knew. But my father had seen an opportunity. As William's health temporarily improved, James began taking more control, repositioning himself as the founder and visionary. When William confronted him, James threatened a legal battle that would drain the company's resources and destroy what William had built. I was weak physically, and as a father, grandfather admitted, I thought if I gave him what he wanted, he would at least honor the spirit of what we had created together. I was wrong. He reached for a water glass with shaking hands. I held it to his lips, mind racing with implications. There is more, he continued after drinking. When you were born, I set up a trust in your name. 10% of my original company shares to be transferred to you when you turned 25 or completed your education, whichever came later. I never received any shares, I said, confusion mixing with a growing sense of betrayal. Your father had the trust documents modified while I was undergoing heart surgery. He and Diana became trustees with full control until you turned 35. They never intended for you to know. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My parents had not just sidelined me from the company, they had actively stolen what was legally mine. The depth of their deception was staggering. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Because I found a way to make it right. A ghost of his old smile appeared. I have been quietly buying back shares through proxy investors for years. Those shares are not part of the original trust. They belong to me personally, and I can leave them to whomever I choose. He directed me to a safe deposit box at Connecticut National Bank, containing the original company documents, evidence of the trust's intended structure, and documentation of his recent stock acquisitions. The key was taped under the bottom drawer of his bedside table. Alaska, you are the true Turner heir, he said, gripping my hand with surprising strength. Not because of your name, but because you have the vision, the integrity, and the determination I always valued. James lost sight of those things in his hunger for control and recognition. As dawn broke, I left the nursing home with the key and a new understanding of my family's true nature. I went directly to the bank and accessed the safe deposit box. Inside was everything grandfather had promised, along with a personal letter outlining his wishes for the company's future. A future with me at the helm. Armed with this knowledge, I hired Jonathan Myers, a private investigator specializing in corporate malfeasance. Within 2 weeks, he delivered a comprehensive report detailing years of questionable business practices, inflated earnings reports, tax avoidance schemes, conflicts of interest in contract awards, and systematic misuse of company funds for personal expenses, primarily by my father and brother. Most damning was evidence that my father had used company resources to bury sexual harassment complaints against Marcus from 3 female employees, including settlements with non-disclosure agreements paid from an obscure corporate titled account. I was cataloging this evidence in my apartment when Marcus showed up unannounced. His typical swagger was missing, replaced by an unusual nervousness. "What are you doing, Alaska?" he asked, glancing at the documents spread across my dining table. I managed to slide the most sensitive ones out of sight. "Research for a PR campaign," I lied smoothly. "What brings you here, Marcus? You never visit me." "Dad is worried about you. You have been spending a lot of time with grandfather asking questions around the office. He thinks you are stirring up trouble." "Is that what he thinks, or is that what you think?" Marcus ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a rare gesture of discomfort. "Look, just back off, okay? Everything is fine the way it is. You have a good job. The family takes care of you. Why rock the boat?" "Because the boat is heading for an iceberg," I replied. "The company cannot sustain the current leadership decisions." His expression hardened. "This is not your company to fix Alaska. It is Dad's. And someday it will be mine. Know your place." After he left, I knew I needed to accelerate my plans. I contacted my grandfather's former attorney, Harold Winters, who had been pushed out when my father took control. Harold confirmed everything grandfather had told me and agreed to help me navigate the legal challenges ahead. Meanwhile, my parents were growing suspicious. My mother suggested I take an extended trip to Europe to decompress after all your hard work in school. My father offered to fund a business venture of my own, separate from Turner Enterprises, an obvious attempt to get me away from the company. I pretended to consider these offers while continuing my investigation. I was about to access server records containing executive communications when the nursing home called again. Grandfather's condition had deteriorated rapidly. He was not expected to last the night. I rushed to his side, but he was already unconscious, breathing shallow machines beeping ominously around him. I sat with him through the night, holding his hand, whispering promises that I would set things right. He never regained consciousness. William Turner died at 4:17 in the morning, taking his fighting spirit with him but leaving behind the tools I needed to expose the truth. It was time to confront my father. I returned to the family home the day after grandfather's death, a folder of evidence tucked under my arm and determination hardening my resolve. The house was unusually quiet, staff moving like shadows as if sensing the coming storm. My father was in his office, my mother and Marcus with him, discussing funeral arrangements when I entered without knocking. All three looked up surprised, quickly turning to irritation on my father's face. "Alaska, we are in the middle of something important," he said, emphasizing the word important, as if whatever I had to say could not possibly qualify. "This cannot wait," I replied, closing the door behind me. "We need to talk about the future of Turner Enterprises." Marcus snorted. "Here we go again." I placed the folder on my father's desk and opened it to reveal the original company documents with grandfather's signature. "I know the truth about how grandfather started the company, about how you took credit for his work, about the trust fund you hid from me." The color drained from my father's face, but he quickly recovered. "Whatever William told you in his confused state." He was not confused. He was crystal clear, and he left me proof. I removed another document from the folder. This is a copy of his personal will updated 3 months ago. He left me his voting shares in the company, which combined with the trust shares that should have been transferred to me years ago, give me a significant ownership stake. My mother stood up, always quick to defend her husband. "Alaska, this is preposterous. Your grandfather was ill. This document was clearly created under duress. The will was witnessed by 2 doctors and a legal team with no connection to our family," I countered. "And then there is this." I produced the private investigator's report. A complete accounting of the financial irregularities, the misappropriation of funds, the buried harassment complaints. Should I continue? My father's face had turned from pale to red, a vein pulsing at his temple. "Where did you get these documents? You had no right to access confidential company information." "I had every right. As a shareholder, as grandfather's heir, as someone who actually cares about the company's future instead of just using it as a personal ATM. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing for the folder, but I pulled it back. "You ungrateful little snake," he hissed, "after everything this family has done for you." "Done for me," I laughed bitterly. "You mean after systematically excluding me, lying to me, and stealing what was rightfully mine? Those things—" My father stood now, his 6'3" frame towering over me. "What exactly do you want, Alaska money? A better position in the company. Name it, and we can resolve this as a family." "I want the truth to come out," I said simply. "I want what grandfather intended for me to have a real role in the company he built, and I want accountability for the mismanagement and fraud." "Impossible," he snapped. "Do you have any idea what that would do to our reputation, to our share price? Perhaps you should have thought of that before you started falsifying financial reports." My mother approached her perfectly manicured hand, reaching out as if to soothe a wild animal. "Darling, let us be reasonable. We can find a compromise that works for everyone. There is no need to drag the family name through the mud." The time for compromise was years ago when I first came home with my degree and ideas for the company. You all chose to dismiss me instead. Now we do things my way, or I take this information public. Marcus stepped toward me aggressively. "You would not dare." "I have copies of everything with my lawyer and a storage cloud," I warned. "If anything happens to me, it all goes to the SEC, the board, and the Wall Street Journal, simultaneously." My father was pacing now, running his hands through his silver hair in agitation. "This is insanity. You would destroy everything our family has built over some perceived slight—" "You are the one who destroyed what our family built," I countered. "Grandfather created something meaningful. You turned it into a personal fiefdom. You corrupted it just like you corrupted Marcus." That hit a nerve. My father stopped pacing and turned to me, his face contorted with rage. "You think you can just waltz in here with some papers and take over? You are nothing, Alaska. Nothing. You have no idea what it takes to run this company. You are a little girl playing at business, and I will not let you ruin what I have spent my life building." "What you stole, you mean I?" corrected, standing my ground, even as he advanced toward me. "And I am not nothing. I am William Turner's granddaughter, and I have more right to this company than you ever did." He moved so quickly I barely saw it coming. His hand struck my face with a force that sent me stumbling backward. My mother gasped but did not intervene. Marcus looked shocked but remained rooted in place. "Get out of my house," my father growled. "Get out and take your delusions with you." I should have left then. Part of me knew that. But anger and 28 years of suppressed resentment overrode my better judgment. I straightened up, tasting blood where my teeth had cut into my cheek. "I am not going anywhere until you acknowledge the truth and agree to my terms. By this time tomorrow, either you announce your resignation and my appointment to the board, or I release everything I have to the public." His face transformed into something I did not recognize, a mask of pure fury that erased any resemblance to the father I had once adored. He lunged forward, grabbing my shoulders with bruising force. "You ungrateful, treacherous little bitch." He shoved me hard, sending me flying backward toward the office door. But it was not the solid wooden door I expected to hit. My father's renovation of the house had included replacing the old office door with an artistic glass one, a status symbol meant to showcase his refined taste. The glass shattered around me in a deafening crash, shards cutting into my back, arms, and legs as I fell through it into the hallway. Pain exploded across my body, bright and hot. Blood began soaking through my white blouse. The household staff came running at the noise, their faces registering horror at the scene before them. I lay there, surrounded by broken glass, looking up at my father through the shattered doorway. His rage had turned to shock, as if he could not quite believe what he had just done. My mother stood behind him, hands covering her mouth. Marcus looked pale, taking a half step toward me, but stopping when my father raised a hand. Despite the pain, despite the blood now running down my face from a cut near my hairline, I found myself smiling. In that moment of violence, my father had shown his true character in front of witnesses. He had given me exactly what I needed. "You just lost everything," I said, my voice steady, despite the pain shooting through my body. "Everything." The family butler was helping me up, asking if I needed an ambulance. My father seemed to snap out of his shock, moving into damage control mode. "It was an accident," he announced to the gathering staff. "Alaska tripped and fell. Call Dr. Peterson, not an ambulance. This is a family matter." Even now, he was more concerned with appearances than with my well-being. That cemented my resolve. As the housekeeper pressed a towel to my bleeding cuts, I looked directly at my father. "I will be out of your house in an hour," I said calmly. "But this is far from over." True to my word, I had a car service pick me up after the family doctor treated my wounds. He gave me 7 stitches for the worst cut and bandaged the others, repeatedly asking how I had fallen into a glass door. I said nothing, but his skeptical expression told me he did not believe the accident story. As I was leaving, Marcus caught me in the foyer. For a moment, he seemed about to apologize, a flicker of the brother I had once loved showing through his carefully cultivated executive image. But then my father called his name from the study and the moment passed. Marcus turned away without a word, choosing his side yet again. That night, in the safety of my apartment, I set my plan in motion. My father had thrown me through a glass door, but he had no idea what was coming through that broken barrier: the truth, justice, and the end of his carefully constructed empire of lies. The emergency room doctor frowned at me as she examined the lacerations across my back and arms. I had gone there after leaving my parents' house, knowing I needed proper medical attention, not the hasty patch job from the family doctor who was more concerned with my father's reputation than my health. "These are consistent with being pushed through glass," she said, her voice carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp with suspicion. "Do you want to tell me what really happened?" "Exactly what you think happened," I replied, wincing, as she cleaned a particularly deep cut. "My father threw me through a glass door during an argument." She paused. "Would you like me to call the police? This is assault, Miss Turner." I shook my head. "I have another way to handle this." one that will hurt him much more than criminal charges. The doctor insisted on documenting my injuries with photographs for medical purposes, though we both knew they could serve another purpose if needed. 27 distinct cuts, 7 requiring stitches and bruising on my shoulders in the shape of handprints. A medical record that told the truth my family would try to deny. While I was still in the treatment room, my phone began buzzing with messages. My father offering a substantial peace settlement if I would put this unfortunate incident behind us. My mother alternating between guilt-tripping "how could you upset your father like that" and bribery "we could discuss a VP position for you." Even Marcus sent a text more threatening than conciliatory: "Dad is willing to forgive if you back down now. This is your only chance." I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I called Harold Winter's grandfather's attorney from the hospital parking lot. "It has escalated," I told him. "I need to execute our contingency plan immediately." Harold's voice was grave. "Are you certain, once this is in motion?" He threw me through a glass door. "Harold, I am covered in stitches and bandages. There is no going back." While recovering in my apartment, I began gathering digital evidence from company servers using the access credentials grandfather had provided before his death. I downloaded financial reports, board meeting minutes, emails between executives discussing questionable practices, and most damning communications about burying harassment complaints against Marcus. My phone rang again. "Unknown number," I answered cautiously. "Alaska. It is Marion. Marion Joyce, my grandfather's personal assistant for 20 years before my father forced her into early retirement. I just heard about William. I am so sorry." "Thank you, Marion." A lump formed in my throat. In all the chaos, I had barely had time to grieve. "There is something you should know," she continued. "Your grandfather gave me a package several months ago. He made me promise to deliver it to you if anything happened to him. He was very specific that it should not go to your father or anyone else." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment. Marion arrived punctually, elegant as always, despite being in her 70s. She handed me a sealed envelope thicker than I expected. "He believed in you," she said simply, "even when no one else did." Back in my apartment, I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten letter from grandfather. The letter explained that he had maintained copies of the original company formation documents, including proof that the initial patents were his work, not my father's. The USB contained digital scans of everything, along with audio recordings of conversations with my father from years ago, discussing how they would revise the company history to position James as the founder. The final piece of evidence, a recorded board meeting from 15 years earlier, where my father explicitly acknowledged William as the true founder and himself as the son who carried forward his father's legacy. A statement that directly contradicted the origin story he had been telling for years. I contacted Rachel Kim, an investigative journalist I had befriended during college. She had built her reputation exposing corporate corruption and had no fear of powerful enemies. "This is the real deal," she said after reviewing a portion of my evidence. "A family dynasty built on lies, fraud, and stolen credit, plus violence when challenged. I can have this ready to publish within 24 hours if you give the word." Next, I reached out to select board members who had always been somewhat skeptical of my father's leadership. Gerald Watson had been my grandfather's friend and had only stayed on the board out of loyalty to the company itself. Sandra Michaels had voted against several of my father's more questionable decisions. Both agreed to meet me discreetly. "I always knew something was off," Gerald said, after reviewing the evidence in my hotel room. "William was the visionary. James was just good at taking credit. Sandra was more focused on the financial implications. If this goes public, the stock will tank initially. Are you prepared for that?" "The company can recover from temporary stock devaluation," I replied. "It cannot recover from continuing fraud and mismanagement. This intervention is necessary for long-term survival." While these pieces were falling into place, I received the call I had been expecting, grandfather's attorney notifying me of his death and the need to attend the will reading. My parents would be there, of course. I would need to face them again, this time with a plan fully in motion. The will reading was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Harold Winter's office. I arrived early dressed in a high-necked blouse that concealed most of my bandages, though nothing could hide the stitches on my face or my still swollen lip. My parents and Marcus arrived together, a united front. My father barely looked at me. My mother made a show of concern, gasping at my visible injuries. "Oh, darling, you really should have stayed home and rested after your accident." The emphasis on accident was unmistakable. The family narrative was already established. Harold conducted the reading with professional detachment. Minor bequests to staff and charities came first. Then the bombshell. To my granddaughter Alaska Turner, I leave all my personal shares in Turner Enterprises constituting 15% of voting stock, along with all documentation in my possession regarding the founding and history of said company. Furthermore, I am exercising my authority as trustee to release to Alaska the trust established at her birth containing an additional 10% of company shares, which should have been transferred to her upon completion of her business degree. My father shot to his feet. This is preposterous. He cannot release a trust where I am co-trustee without my signature. Harold calmly produced another document. Actually, James, your father filed this amendment 6 months ago, removing you as trustee based on this documented conflict of interest. The amendment was approved by the court. The transfer is legal and binding. The implication was staggering. I now controlled 25% of voting shares in Turner Enterprises. Not enough for majority control, but enough to force a board vote on key issues including leadership. My father's face had gone from red to ashen. "You orchestrated this," he accused me. "You manipulated a sick old man." William was in full possession of his faculties, Harold interjected. He was evaluated by 2 independent physicians before making these changes. Their certifications are included in the documentation. As we left the attorney's office, my father grabbed my arm, pulling me aside in the corridor. "Name your price," he hissed. "Everyone has one. What will it take for this to disappear?" I looked at him, this man who had raised me, but never really seen me, who had thrown me through glass, rather than face the truth. "It is not about money," I said quietly. "It is about justice. For grandfather. For the company. For me." I pulled my arm free and walked away, my plan accelerating with every step. That night would change everything. From my hotel room, I initiated the final phase. At exactly midnight, Rachel Kim published her explosive exposé on the true history of Turner Enterprises, complete with documents proving William's role as founder and James's systematic erasure of that truth. Simultaneously, I emailed comprehensive evidence of financial improprieties to all board members and major shareholders. I posted photos of my injuries on my personal social media accounts previously unused for years with a simple statement: "This is what happens when you challenge the lies that built an empire. The truth may hurt, but it will set us free." At 1 a.m., I sent detailed documentation to the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding the falsified financial statements and misappropriation of company funds. At 2 a.m., 3 former employees who had been silenced by NDAs after harassment by Marcus received anonymized copies of documents proving the company had covered up their complaints systematically. By 3 a.m., my phone was blowing up with notifications. The story was spreading faster than even I had anticipated. Business reporters were calling for comments. Board members were texting in shock. The carefully constructed image of Turner Enterprises and the family behind it was unraveling in real time. At 4 a.m. came the knock at my hotel room door. I checked the peephole, surprised to see Marcus standing there alone, looking disheveled, and for once without his practiced confidence. I opened the door cautiously, keeping the security chain engaged. "What do you want?" "Can I come in, please?" Against my better judgment, I let him in. He stood awkwardly in the center of the room, taking in my bandaged appearance with what seemed like genuine regret. "I did not know he would do that to you," he said finally. "I knew he had a temper, but not that. Why are you here, Marcus? Dad send you to threaten me?" He shook his head. "He does not know I am here. He is not well, having some kind of breakdown." Mom sedated him. "And you thought, what? That you would succeed where he failed, convince me to undo everything?" "No." He sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "I came to say I am sorry, and that you were right, about everything. The company, the lies, the cover-ups, I was raised in it, benefited from it. I never questioned it. I studied my brother's face, looking for the manipulation, the angle. But for perhaps the first time since we were children, he seemed genuine. "It is too late for apologies," I said. "The truth is already out there." "I know." He ran a hand through his uncombed hair. "And maybe that is for the best. This company, it twisted all of us. Dad most of all." As dawn broke, the first news reports began appearing on morning shows. The once mighty Turner family empire was facing its reckoning. Stock prices would plummet when the markets opened. Board members would call for emergency meetings. Business partners would distance themselves. And at the center of it all, a daughter who had finally claimed her rightful place and exposed the rot at the core of her family's legacy. My father called at 6 a.m., his voice hoarse with rage or perhaps fear. "What have you done?" he demanded. "Do you have any idea the damage you have caused?" "I did not cause the damage," I replied calmly. "I merely exposed it. There is a difference. I will fight this, with every resource I have." "You do not have the resources you think you have," I informed him. "The board is calling an emergency vote to suspend you pending investigation. Your corporate accounts are being frozen as we speak. And with grandfather's shares now in my control, I have enough voting power to ensure the motion passes." There was silence on the other end, then a sound I had never heard before, my father crying, not in sadness but in impotent rage, the sound of a man watching his kingdom crumble. "You were my daughter," he said finally. "And you were my father," I replied. "That should have mattered more than the company, to both of us." I hung up as the sun rose fully over the city skyline. By morning, just as I had promised, their perfect life had completely fallen apart, and from the rubble something new and honest would emerge. The methodical execution of my plan began precisely at midnight. While most of America slept, I sat in my hotel room surrounded by 3 laptops, each dedicated to a different aspect of the Turner Enterprises takedown. The main screen displayed Rachel Kim's article ready to go live on the Business Insider website. The headline was stark. "The Turner Enterprise Fraud: How America's Tech Dynasty Was Built on Lies and Stolen Credit." Rachel had outdone herself crafting a detailed narrative backed by irrefutable evidence. The article included scans of original patents in William Turner's name, time-stamped recordings of James Turner, admitting his father was the true founder, and financial documentation showing years of mismanagement. Most damning was the section on corporate culture, featuring testimonials from former employees about the toxic environment fostered by James and Marcus Turner. At 12 a.m. sharp, I sent Rachel the final approval. Within minutes, the story was live, beginning its digital journey across the internet. Notifications started immediately as business journalists and industry insiders shared the bombshell report. The truth was finally escaping the Turner family vault. The second laptop was dedicated to shareholder and board communications. I had prepared detailed packets for each recipient, customized to address their specific concerns and interests in the company. At 12:15 a.m., I began sending these packages to all 12 board members, the top 20 institutional investors, and key minority shareholders. Gerald Watson, my grandfather's oldest ally on the board, was the first to respond a simple message. "It is about time." Emergency board meeting called for 8 a.m. The third laptop handled the social media campaign. At 12:30 a.m., I posted the photos of my injuries on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn simultaneously. The images were graphic, but not gratuitous, showing my stitched face, bandaged arms, and the unmistakable bruising on my shoulders in the shape of handprints. My caption was simple: "The price of challenging James Turner's lies." This is what happens when you question the man who stole credit for his father's genius and built an empire on fraud. I was thrown through a glass door for speaking truth to power. Today, the real story of Turner Enterprises will be heard. The posts began gathering momentum immediately, with thousands of shares within the first hour. Industry contacts, former classmates, and even competitors of Turner Enterprises expressed shock and support. Turner Truth began trending in business circles. At 1 a.m., I sent a comprehensive dossier to the Securities and Exchange Commission via their whistleblower portal. The documentation included evidence of financial report falsification, misappropriation of company funds for personal use, and systematic efforts to mislead investors about company performance. I had carefully organized everything according to SEC guidelines, making it easy for investigators to verify each claim. By 2 a.m., the first business news channels were picking up the story. CNBC ran a breaking news alert. Bloomberg issued a special report. The financial world, even at that hour, was beginning to react. At 2:30 a.m., I executed perhaps the most personally satisfying part of the plan. I sent anonymized documentation to 3 former employees who had filed harassment complaints against Marcus, only to be silenced by aggressive NDAs and settlements. The packages included proof that the company had known about Marcus's pattern of behavior and actively worked to protect him rather than address it. One of the women, Stephanie Rodriguez, called me within minutes of receiving the information. "Is this real?" she asked, voice tight with emotion. "Can I actually speak about what happened now?" "The NDAs were secured through coercion and as part of a larger fraud," I explained. "Our legal team believes they are unenforceable. You can tell your story without fear of repercussion." By 3 a.m., overseas markets were reacting. Turner Enterprises' stock in Asian trading had dropped 15% and was still falling. The financial bloodbath would be even worse when American markets opened. My phone began ringing nonstop, reporters seeking comments, board members demanding explanations, former family friends expressing either shock or quietly admitting they had always suspected something was not right in that house. I had prepared for this avalanche of communication using an app to filter and sort incoming messages. Priority was given to board members, especially those I needed to secure for the upcoming vote. Media requests went to a special folder for later handling by the crisis management team I had hired. Personal attacks from family loyalists were automatically blocked. At 4 a.m. came the unexpected knock at my door. Marcus, disheveled and defeated, seeking not reconciliation exactly, but perhaps understanding. Our conversation was brief but significant, marking the first crack in the unified Turner front. He left looking both relieved and terrified, a man whose entire identity was built on a foundation now crumbling beneath him. By 5 a.m., early morning shows were leading with the Turner Enterprises scandal. Financial analysts were already speculating about the company's future. The stock was expected to lose at least 30% of its value when markets opened. Business partners began issuing carefully worded statements expressing concern and awaiting further information corporate speak for distancing themselves from the radioactive Turner name. At 6 a.m., James Turner finally called, his voice a mixture of rage and desperation. The mighty patriarch reduced to pleading and threats in the same breath. I remained calm, explaining the reality of his situation with the detached precision I had learned in business school. The conversation ended with his broken sobbing, a sound that should have given me satisfaction, but instead left me feeling hollow. At 7 a.m., I received confirmation that enough board members had committed to supporting the motion to suspend James Turner as CEO pending investigation. Between my 25% voting share and the allies I had secured, we had a comfortable majority. At 7:30 a.m., I left my hotel room for the first time in 24 hours, heading to Turner Enterprises headquarters for the emergency board meeting. The drive through morning traffic gave me time to prepare mentally for the confrontation ahead. I knew my father would be there, fighting for his professional life with the same ferocity with which he had thrown me through that glass door. When I arrived at the gleaming skyscraper bearing my family name, there was already a crowd of reporters outside. Security escorted me through a side entrance up a private elevator to the boardroom level. The tension in the air was palpable. Executives and assistants huddled in corners, whispering urgently, falling silent as I passed. The boardroom doors were closed when I reached them. I paused for a moment, touching the stitches on my face gently. Every twinge of pain was a reminder of what had brought me to this moment. I straightened my spine, adjusted my blazer, and pushed open the doors. 12 board members sat around the massive mahogany table. My father stood at the head mid-sentence, stopping abruptly when I entered. My mother sat in a visitor chair against the wall, her perfect composure slipping to show genuine fear. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. "Alaska," my father said, his tone unreadable. "The board was just discussing the unfortunate misunderstandings that have led to this unnecessary meeting." Gerald Watson, acting as interim chair, cleared his throat. Actually, James, we were discussing the substantial evidence of misconduct that necessitated this emergency session. I took the empty seat directly opposite my father. Thank you for accommodating this meeting on such short notice, I said, addressing the board collectively. I understand we are here to vote on the temporary suspension of James Turner as CEO pending a full investigation of the allegations that have come to light. My father slammed his hand on the table. This is a farce, a vindictive daughter trying to steal what she did not earn. Sandra Michaels, the most financially astute board member, looked at him coldly. The markets disagree, James. We are down 28% in pre-trading, and our largest institutional investor just called me personally to express grave concerns. That is hardly a family squabble. For the next hour, the board systematically reviewed the evidence I had provided. My father alternated between righteous indignation and attempts at emotional manipulation. But the documentation was too comprehensive, the case too compelling. When the vote finally came, it was 9-3 in favor of suspending James Turner and appointing an interim CEO while investigations proceeded. This is not over, my father said as he gathered his papers, voice low and dangerous. You have no idea what you have done. Actually, I know exactly what I have done, I replied calmly. I have saved this company from your ego and mismanagement. Grandfather would be proud. The mention of William Turner seemed to hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, I glimpsed vulnerability beneath the rage, perhaps even a flicker of shame. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold mask I knew so well. As security escorted him from the boardroom, my mother trailing behind in tearful disbelief, the board turned to the question of interim leadership. Gerald nominated me, citing my education, knowledge of the company, and proven commitment to corporate integrity. Are you prepared for this responsibility? Alaska Sandra asked, her expression serious. The company is in crisis. The road ahead will be exceptionally difficult. I thought of my grandfather, of his belief in me when no one else saw my potential. I thought of the employees who deserved better than what my father had given them. I thought of the truth finally seeing daylight after decades in shadow. I am prepared, I said firmly. This company was built on innovation and integrity before my father corrupted it. I intend to restore both. The vote was unanimous. By 9 a.m., I had been appointed interim CEO of Turner Enterprises. By 10 a.m., a press release announced the change in leadership and the company's commitment to transparency, accountability, and a return to the innovative spirit of founder William Turner. As markets opened, our stock continued its freefall, but by midday had begun to stabilize as investors responded positively to the leadership change and transparency measures. The worst financial damage had been contained, though the road to recovery would be long. That afternoon, as I sat in what had been my father's office, now mine, I received one last unexpected visitor. Marcus, looking more collected than he had at 4 a.m., but still without his usual artificial confidence. The board approved your appointment, he said, hovering in the doorway. Congratulations, I suppose. What do you want, Marcus? He entered cautiously, taking a seat across from me. To help, believe it or not, I know every skeleton in every closet, every deal Dad made that might come back to haunt us, every executive who was complicit and who might try to undermine you. I studied him carefully. Why would you help me take down what you spent your whole life being groomed to inherit? He looked out the window at the city skyline. Because I was miserable. Because I knew I was not good enough. Because Dad's approval always came with conditions I could never fully meet. Because he hesitated, because when he threw you through that door, I saw what I was becoming, what I had already become. I did not trust him, not completely. But I recognized the opportunity. Marcus did indeed know where all the bodies were buried. He had been at our father's side for years, witness to every questionable decision, every ethical compromise. If you want to help, I said finally, you can start by telling me everything. Every deal, every cover-up, every threat. Leave nothing out. He nodded, relief visible in his expression. Where do you want to begin? At the beginning, I said firmly, with the truth about how grandfather started this company. As Marcus began to speak, I felt the weight of the past 24 hours. I had taken back what was rightfully mine, exposed decades of lies, and assumed control of a company in crisis. The injuries from my father's violence still ached beneath my bandages. But for the first time since grandfather's death, I felt something like peace. The truth was out. Justice, however imperfect, had been served. The empire my father had claimed as his creation was now in the hands of its rightful heir, not because of my name or bloodline, but because I had the courage to demand the truth and the determination to see it recognized. By morning, their perfect life had completely fallen apart. And from its ruins, something authentic and honorable could finally be built. 1 month after the glass door incident, I sat at the head of the Turner Enterprises boardroom table, occupying the chair my grandfather had once filled. The room looked different now. I had replaced the imposing mahogany table with a more modern collaborative design. The dark drapes that had kept the room in perpetual twilight were gone, replaced by clear glass that let in natural light. Small changes that symbolized the larger transformation underway. The quarterly board meeting had just concluded, my first as permanent CEO after the interim period had proven my capability to lead. The financial report showed signs of recovery after the initial shock. Stock prices had stabilized. Key clients had renewed contracts. New talent was being attracted by our renewed commitment to innovation and ethical practices. That went better than expected, Gerald commented, as the other board members filed out. The restructuring plan received unanimous approval. Even Thomas voted yes, and he was your father's strongest ally. I gathered my notes, organized as always. The plan makes financial sense. Even those loyal to my father can see that continuing his practices would have led to eventual collapse. Gerald lingered, studying me with grandfatherly concern. The company is recovering nicely. How about you, Alaska? Are you healing too? The question caught me off guard. In the whirlwind of the past month, I had focused entirely on saving the company, putting my own recovery on the back burner. The physical wounds were healing, the stitches removed, leaving only faint red lines that would eventually fade to silver. The emotional wounds were another matter entirely. I am getting there, I admitted. One day at a time. The aftermath of my father's violence and the subsequent corporate upheaval had been a media sensation. James Turner, once celebrated as a visionary CEO, was now facing legal consequences for financial improprieties. The SEC investigation had uncovered even more than I had initially found, including tax evasion schemes and misleading investor statements. My mother had stood by him, initially playing the role of loyal wife in public. But as more evidence emerged and social disgrace settled around them like a shroud, she quietly filed for divorce and retreated to their house in the Hamptons. Her carefully cultivated social status was in tatters, invitations to charity galas and cultural events suddenly drying up. Marcus had surprised everyone, including himself, perhaps. After our late-night conversation in my hotel room, he had made the decision to cooperate fully with investigators, providing insider information that proved invaluable in untangling the web of financial misdeeds. In exchange, he received immunity from prosecution but resigned from the company. Last I heard, he was volunteering at a business incubator for underprivileged youth, using his experience as a cautionary tale while helping young entrepreneurs avoid the ethical pitfalls he had witnessed. It was an unexpected redemption arc for someone I had written off as irredeemably corrupted by our father's influence. After Gerald left, I walked through the executive floor, still adjusting to the deference employees showed me. Many were new hires brought in to replace executives who had been too complicit in my father's dubious practices to remain. But some were longtime employees who had survived the Turner regime by keeping their heads down and doing their jobs with quiet integrity. One of these was Eleanor Jenkins, a senior programmer who had been with the company since my grandfather's days. She caught me as I passed her office. "Miss Turner, do you have a moment?" I stepped inside her modest workspace, walls covered with coding diagrams and family photos. "Of course, Eleanor, and please call me Alaska." She smiled tentatively. "Alaska, then. I wanted to thank you personally for the changes you've implemented. The new parental leave policy, the ethical review board, the transparency in decision-making. Your grandfather would have been proud." Her words touched me more deeply than she could know. "Did you work with him directly?" "For several years. He was a good man. Brilliant, but humble. He always asked about my children, remembered their names and interests." She hesitated. "Your father was different." "Yes," I acknowledged simply. he was. I almost left many times, she admitted. But this company was your grandfather's dream before it became your father's ego trip. Some of us stayed to honor what it was supposed to be. I found myself blinking back unexpected tears. Thank you for holding on. People like you are why this company is worth saving. Back in my office, I reviewed the remaining tasks for the day. Among them was a proposal for the William Turner Innovation Scholarship, a program I had created to honor my grandfather's legacy. The scholarship would provide full funding for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds to pursue degrees in technology and business. As I made final edits to the proposal, my hand unconsciously went to the scar near my hairline, the most visible reminder of my father's violence. The doctor had offered plastic surgery to minimize its appearance, but I had declined. The scar served as a reminder of what I had overcome, a physical manifestation of the moment everything changed. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification therapy in 1 hour. Another change in my life. The recognition that healing required more than just professional success. Dr. Larson had been helping me process not just the trauma of the glass door incident, but the lifetime of emotional neglect and manipulation that preceded it. Our sessions often left me emotionally drained but clearer, like a thunderstorm that clears the air. We had discussed my complicated feelings about my family, the simultaneous grief and relief that came with their removal from my life, the lingering effects of growing up in an environment where love was conditional and truth malleable. The hardest part of recovery, Dr. Larson had told me in our last session, is accepting that some relationships cannot be saved, only survived. Your father may never acknowledge the harm he caused or take responsibility for his actions. Your healing cannot depend on his redemption. It was a difficult truth to accept, but a necessary one. My father had made no attempt to contact me since the board meeting, maintaining his innocence even as evidence mounted against him. My mother had sent a single message. I hope you are satisfied with what you have done to this family. Neither understood that they had destroyed the family long before I exposed the truth. As I was leaving for my appointment, my assistant informed me that a former employee was waiting to see me. She doesn't have an appointment, but she was quite insistent. The woman who stood as I entered the reception area was vaguely familiar. Late 30s, professionally dressed with a determined expression. Miss Turner, she extended her hand. I'm Stephanie Rodriguez. We spoke briefly on the phone the night everything came out. Recognition dawned. One of Marcus's harassment victims who had been silenced by company NDAs. Of course, Miss Rodriguez. Please come in. In my office, she declined coffee but sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap. I wanted to thank you in person. The invalidation of those NDAs has allowed us to tell our stories without fear of legal repercussion. That alone would be significant. But your company's acknowledgement of wrongdoing and public apology, that meant everything. I had issued a formal apology on behalf of Turner Enterprises to all employees who had suffered harassment or discrimination under previous leadership, with a commitment to making amends through both financial restitution and structural changes to prevent future abuses. It was the right thing to do, I said simply. It was brave, she countered. Many companies would have tried to contain the damage or minimize the situation. You confronted it head-on. After she left, I sat quietly in my office watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city skyline. Stephanie's visit had highlighted something important in exposing my family's lies. I had created space for other truths to emerge, other injustices to be acknowledged and addressed. My therapy appointment that day focused on forgiveness, not of my father, but of myself. For the years I had sought his approval despite knowing the kind of man he was. For the times I had remained silent to keep the peace. For the part of me that still sometimes wondered if I could have found another way. Forgiveness is not about absolving others of responsibility, Dr. Larson reminded me. It is about freeing yourself from the burden of resentment. The healing process was not linear. Some days were easier than others. There were moments when professional triumph was overshadowed by personal loss, when I would see a father and daughter walking together on the street and feel a pang of grief for what I never truly had. But there were also moments of unexpected joy, of discovery and connection that would not have been possible within the constraints of my former life. I had found allies in unexpected places, former employees who reached out with information and support, board members who had secretly chafed under my father's leadership, even competitors who respected the courage it took to expose wrongdoing within my own family. Most surprising was the community of whistleblowers and corporate ethics advocates who welcomed me into their fold. People who had sacrificed careers and relationships to expose wrongdoing, who understood the personal cost of choosing truth over loyalty, integrity over comfort. In their company, I found a kind of belonging I had never experienced within my own family. 6 months after the glass door incident, I stood at a podium in the Turner Enterprises atrium unveiling a new installation, a wall of transparent glass etched with my grandfather's original patents and quotes about innovation, integrity, and purpose. A symbolic reclaiming of his legacy, an acknowledgement of the true foundation upon which the company was built. William Turner believed that success without integrity is failure in disguise, I told the assembled employees. He believed that innovation should solve real problems, not create new ones. That business could be both profitable and ethical. These principles were temporarily lost under subsequent leadership, but they were never forgotten. Today, we recommit ourselves to the vision of our true founder. As I concluded my speech to enthusiastic applause, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass installation. The scar near my hairline had faded somewhat but remained visible. I no longer tried to hide it with makeup or hairstyling. It had become part of my story, a reminder that sometimes we must break through barriers literally and figuratively to reclaim what is rightfully ours. The path forward was not without challenges. The company still faced litigation, reputation management issues, and the difficult work of rebuilding trust with stakeholders. I still faced moments of doubt nights when memories of shattered glass and family betrayal kept me awake. But for the first time in my life, I was not seeking anyone else's approval or validation. I was leading with my own vision, guided by my grandfather's principles, but not bound by anyone else's expectations. The freedom in that realization was perhaps the most profound healing of all. What I had learned through this painful journey was that true strength comes not from controlling others, but from standing firmly in your own truth, even when it costs you relationships you once valued. That family is not defined by blood alone, but by respect, honesty, and mutual support. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from those who cannot or will not see your worth. As the sun set on another day of rebuilding what my father had corrupted, I reflected on the words I had spoken as blood ran down my face. You just lost everything. At the time, I meant the company, the reputation, the wealth and status. But looking back, I realized my father had lost something far more valuable long before that moment, the opportunity to know and appreciate his daughter, to build a relationship based on respect rather than control. That was his greatest loss, though he would likely never recognize it as such. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who couldn't see your value? Did you have to walk away from toxic relationships to find your own worth? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and share this video. Remember, sometimes the hardest battles we fight are within our own families, but standing in your truth is always worth it. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gives strength to anyone facing similar struggles with family expectations and finding their own path.